The Finding Purpose podcast is proudly brought to you by Relive the Moments, founded by visionary entrepreneur John Lim. We live in a world where it's easy to capture memories, but Relive the Moments makes it effortless to re-experience and share them. From NFC-enabled tap coasters and photo frames to interactive video cards, Relive the Moments turns everyday objects into unforgettable tap-to-experience keepsakes. Imagine gifting a wedding guest a coaster that instantly opens your highlight reel, or giving your event sponsors a custom frame that tells your story with just one tap. Whether you're celebrating a milestone, planning a wedding, honoring a legacy, or elevating a brand experience, Relive the Moments is the bridge between the past and present, between memory and connection. It's not just a product, it's an experience. Visit www.relivethemoments.com and use promo code PURPOSE for 25% off your first order. Let's bring your memories to life, one tap at a time.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Adam Vora, and I'm so grateful to have you here. This podcast is all about exploring the journeys of incredible individuals, people who have faced adversity, found their purpose, and are now making an impact in their communities. But it's also about my journey. Over the years, I've faced my own obstacles, moments of doubt, and struggles with identity. Through it all, I found my purpose in giving back, creating a space where people can detach from the negative emotions and stigmas they may associate with their own stories, just like I did with mine. Here, we have real conversations about growth, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're searching for direction, striving for personal development, or simply looking for a place to feel seen and understood, this is for you. So if these conversations resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on social media. Now let's dive into today's episode.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm Adam, and as always, I'm grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts or watching on the official YouTube channel of the Finding Purpose podcast, thank you for your support. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a review, and share. It's how we keep this community growing. Over the past few weeks, we've leaned into the theme of consistency as a catalyst for transformation. From Daniel Sears' work in longevity and nervous system mastery to Alan Collins' powerful recovery journey, from Jesse Morgan's path through sobriety and reinvention to Richard Fuhr's commitment to physical and mental alignment. Every episode has revealed what it takes to stay grounded while leveling up. Today's guest embodies that same spirit through discipline, identity, and deep purpose. Idara Otu is an Olympian, entrepreneur, author, and advocate whose story spans global impact and personal power. She represented Nigeria in the 2012 London Olympics as part of the 4x400 relay team. She's a Wall Street veteran with 15 plus years at top investment banks. And she's the founder of Let Girls Run, Read, Grow, a nonprofit committed to empowering African girls through education, athletics, and entrepreneurship. She's also a published author with the children's book, The Miraculous Masquerade, and a memoir, Running Home, that reflects her personal journey and cultural pride. And if that wasn't enough, she recently launched NŌK CHOC, a vegan hot cocoa brand grounded in flavor, story, and wellness. This conversation is about purpose in motion, from Olympic tracks to boardrooms to impact-driven ventures. It's about identity, intention, and what it means to bring every part of yourself into the work. So nice to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was like trying to craft that, get everything that you're doing together. And, I was really honored to have met you when we met, which is very random.
Very random.
And, I'm just glad that we kind of continued the conversation through the summer. And, I finally have you here in studio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. It just seemed like a natural fit after I was able to, read up on you and see all that you've done. And, now I'm diving into your book, which I love how you tell your story. In the beginning, your early years really setting the foundation with your family. I really want to kind of just jump into that and kind of move from there because that's important. So you grew up in Brooklyn.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about that because, the one thing that stuck out to me a lot was the competitive nature that you had with you and your brothers.
Yes. So I like to say that I learned how to compete at home. And many Nigerians are like this, and you'll hear that Nigerians are often very competitive, very intense, and I think that's just in the culture. And, for someone who travels extensively around the continent, there's something special about Nigerians in terms of passion and competitiveness. And growing up, it's funny because what we used to compete in wasn't necessarily athletics. I mean, we compete in everything, but it was academics. And my older brother, he set the bar really high. He was the math whiz in the family. So this is a guy who never got less than 100% in every math test, period. And competing with him, he's 2 years older than me. So competing with him, that was just something that I had to contend with every day. So when you think about it, having someone who is literally perfect in math, it's like, well, where else do you compete? So I was a person who worked really hard. My mother was a professor, a math teacher as well, and had her PhD in applied sciences, right? So we came from a STEM-focused family. So as you often hear, the doctor, lawyer, engineer failure, right? We were definitely in that vein, and that was the culture in our house. And when we we'd come home with our tests in tow. And, back in the day in elementary school, you had to get your test signed and things like that, right? Your report cards. And because my mother was a teacher, she always knew when the report cards came in. She was at parent-teacher conference, and it was really not even parent-teacher. It's parent-teacher Idara conference, right? And we were always in the room. So,
really?
Yeah. My mother would go into the room. And the teacher would say, great student, because I was. But then, like many good students, especially at that age, I was a bit talkative, right? And so if the teacher would let my mother know, she'd look at me and she's like, Idara, is that right? And then, you want to lie, but you can't because, if I say, I don't agree with that, right? My mother would say, well, so you're calling your teacher a liar? And then at that point, it's like, okay, no. So when you're put on the spot, right, you just didn't have, there's nowhere for you to go. So at home, we would come home with our tests, and then it's like if my brother got a 97 and I got a 95, it's like, okay, he beat me. That's one piece of it. And then also with my mom, something that she would always say, like, even if I got a 97 or a 95, it's like, what happened to the 3 points? Yeah. Right? So perfection is something that we were always striving to, even though understanding that perfection wouldn't be there all the time unless it's in math and it's my brother. But hard work was something that was always pushed in our house, and everyone had the same ability, or at least everyone had the same ability to work hard, right? So there wasn't a monopoly on that by anyone in our house or even outside of our house. So there was really we were taught that there was no excuse for failure, right? And that if you weren't trying to be the best, then it wasn't worth trying. And I just internalized that probably to the most degree out of my siblings, to the point where my mother would even sometimes try to say, like, it's like chill.
Really?
Yeah. At one point, it's just like, okay, it's not that deep. Like, we know you work hard. Take a chill pill.
Yeah, that's funny because, I think like planting those seeds early was kind of like an underlying current for a lot of the ventures that you would get into as you got older. I mean, obviously athletics played a tremendous part in your story. And, did you take that same mentality early on? I know basketball was a sport that you were very good at initially, and you didn't get into track until after basketball, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in our household, basketball was the sport.
Yeah.
And my brothers, again, that's the sport they cared about. That's the sport that we gathered around the TV to watch on several occasions
Knicks
at
fans?
night. Yeah. We are diehard Knicks fans in our family. So
I'm a
it's
huge
just,
Celtics fan. Die hard.
sorry.
Only win championships.
You do, but let's keep this positive.
Okay.
But it's just one of those things where that's what we cared about in the household. So that's what was played. And especially at that time, I was always the tallest in my class until high school. So I always played the center, though I was more of a Dennis Rodman player. So I had a lot of defensive capabilities. I was a big rebounder. Right. But I was afraid to shoot, but more so afraid to miss.
Fair.
So I didn't take that many shots. And then what I realized over the time is that as someone who topped out at 5'11", that if I wanted to play basketball at the highest level, that I would have to become a guard. And handles were not on my bingo card, right? So I knew that wasn't going to be for me. And at the same time, I started running track passively in middle school. And then it was my junior year in high school that I transitioned from playing basketball and track to just focusing on track and field entirely. But even throughout from junior high onward, I also played tennis. I played volleyball. My first sport that I joined was soccer, which I hated because, funny enough, it was too much running.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
But remember, I was a sprinter and not a distance runner. So running is relative, right? Because the distances that are involved, and I tend to stay on the shorter side of things.
Fair enough. It's funny because when you talk about your relationship with the track, and I'm reading your book, it's obsessive in a way, and I love it because it kind of has that that Mamba mentality approach to track that you took, and you talk about falling in love with it.
Yeah.
And talk about that relationship that you have, because it's a beautiful relationship, because as the story progresses and you end up running both in Stanford and in Houston, and like you could feel the love of the game just kind of glowing from the pages.
I like that you use the word obsessive, because I think that is an apt way to describe it. And if in college, I remember someone telling me that I was described as intense, and I was just like, where'd you get that from? And after some self-reflection, I understand it. And I think that one thing for me, it goes back to childhood, right? The obsession is really the commitment to hard work. And I think the obsession really is around the joy of seeing the progression and the joy of the journey. And I think that was the biggest thing that I unlocked through track, where there's so many different things that can affect a race and affect success over the course of a season in a particular running discipline. And once I realized that there might be 7 or 8 pillars or levers to pull to affect my overall outcome, then the question became, how do I improve through one of these 8 different things, right? So especially since I ran the 400 and 400 hurdles, these are races that can be run in many different ways. Unlike with the 100, even though there's technique in it, it's for women, it's if you're an elite athlete or an elite sprinter, it's 10 to 11 seconds, right? Somewhere in that range. So you can only just go straight, right? It's sprinting or not. Whereas in the 400, you can be a speed runner, you can be a strength runner, where how you split up the 400 race into those 4 100s or 2 200s, that can be done differently depending on your strengths as a runner. So for someone, especially with my size and stature, whether it's my stride length, my strength, my speed, those are all different things that can be tweaked to perfect this race for me. And then you learn all the things that happen behind the scenes. We were talking about this earlier, just in terms of business and podcasting, that a lot of times as outside looking in, you don't know what you have to do to get there. And the time that's put in the weight room, the time that's put into nutrition or sleeping or supplementing, those are all the different things that I had to use to perfect my craft. And once I started to realize that it wasn't just running fast, and there was just so many different things. And I am a person who tends to always listen to authority anyway. And once I trusted my coach and felt like he knew what he was doing with me or my body in particular, he just became, the rabbi, so to speak. And I just wanted to learn.
Eric.
Sorry?
Eric?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn what he knew, right?
Yeah.
Because if I knew what he knew, then I knew how to perfect what I needed to perfect for me. And that's where the obsession came in, right? And I think sometimes, especially in a sports discipline, the trust aspect is huge, right? And the reason why I was able to there was the obsession that I wanted to do well.
Yeah.
And being addicted to success, I think anyone who's successful in any discipline, they're going to be addicted to whatever the high is of that success. But then I think the maturity is understanding that the journey is really where the high is, and coming out every day and knowing that you're going to have a hard workout. You might throw up. You might be crawling to your car after, right? You might hide out in the bathroom between reps, right? Yeah. All these different things, but knowing that last week you ran the 300 in 37 seconds in a rep, and then now you're at 36.8. So you've improved by 0.2 of a second. That's huge, right? What does that mean? How does that translate into when it comes time for championships, when it comes time for the Olympic trials and things like that? So I like to say that the obsession is purposeful, and because I had a vision and a coach that I trusted, I was really able to dig into the incremental gains that I was getting every day.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lines that I highlighted was when you said my relationship with track was pure and reciprocal. The work and effort I put in was rewarded in kind of accolades and achievement that I enthusiastically decorated in my room. So you understanding that there's levels to it, and knowing that you need to set bars, and you continue to raise the bars, which I found fascinating because you would be on the top of one mountain and you would be looking at the next peak. And that's kind of an underlying approach that I see you've taken throughout your journey. You end up moving like cross country, going to Stanford, and that's a whole different vibe.
Right.
Right. And, one of the things that I admired most about how you move is you acknowledge that it's a different room, but you hold your ground, and your presence is known. And I like that that's the approach that you took, because the book really gives you an awesome introspection of your thought process in these moments of dramatic change and how you handle them. What do you think were key tools that you leaned on every time that you made a change like that? From obviously going to Stanford and then moving to Houston, knowing nobody. What did you lean on?
It's going to sound funny, but I think sometimes my naivete helped me. So I'd be in high school, or between, I guess, birth and 18, I'd gone to California twice. Both times to San Francisco, but like family vacation sort of things. So I didn't really know much about Stanford, but I'd done a summer program at MIT the summer before my senior year of high school. And my program bestie was talking about Stanford all day, every day. It's like, he's going to Stanford, you should go to Stanford, right? And he really put the bug in my ear to go to Stanford. And up until that point, how we decided where we were going to school in our household was U.S. News, right? They had the college rankings. And for us, in our household, it was basically top 3, top 5 or bust, right? So it was Ivy, because Ivy had the strongest brand, or if you were top 10 or whatever it was. Yeah. And the smaller the number, higher the ranking, that was success in our household. Because both our parents did their undergrad degrees in Nigeria, and then both my mother and my father came for higher, like for masters and PhDs. So at that time, I knew that Stanford was 3rd or 4th on the list, But it was in California. Not that I was afraid. I'm not the homesick type of person.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that, but because it was not on the East Coast and all the Ivies were in the East Coast, it just really wasn't on my radar, so to speak. But then after
It
hearing
was Stanford, Rice, and one other school I forgot.
UPenn, those are the places that I
UPenn, yeah.
visited.
Okay.
But it was the full list was Princeton, Harvard, MIT, because my older brother had gone there, Duke. And Duke was really a nod to my basketball playing days and wanting to go there. But then, especially after meeting, and his name is Duran, but after meeting Duran at this summer camp, it was, okay, let me think about lifestyle. Because I know I didn't like the cold, I didn't like winter, which is why Rice was on the list as well. At the time, I believe Rice was number 11. So it was just like right outside of the cusp, but it was still a good school. And at the time, I thought I was going to be a biomechanical engineer and undergrad and then go to med school. And the reason why I ultimately knocked Rice off the list, outside of its ranking being lowest on the list of the schools of my choosing,
Number 11.
it didn't have a medical school, right?
Okay.
So at the time I thought, wherever you went to undergrad, it'd be easier to get into their medical school.
Makes
And because
sense.
they didn't have one, it's just like, well, I can't go there. So I didn't really know that much, to be honest. And because a lot of times I lead more with logic, I think that has allowed me to make quick decisions that have turned out in the end. So I always knew what my why was, and the why was to get a great education, go to a good school, pretty much like the immigrant child's dream,
Yeah.
and then also run. So running was a big piece of it, which also disqualified certain schools at the time. So Stanford really was the best possible option on paper for everything I wanted to do. So it had the weather, beautiful campus. It got a good track team I wanted to run. It had a medical school, had a strong engineering program. It was top 5, right? So everything just made sense from that perspective. And that was all I needed. And I think about some of my other decisions, like when I moved to Houston, I didn't think about the fact that I didn't have family there or friends there until after I got there.
Yeah.
When I moved down to Houston for a job opportunity that I was chasing, I wanted to be a trader. That was where the role was. So if that's what I want, then might as well go there, right? 1 + 1 = 2. So I think those are the things, I think, and also as I've grown and matured, I start to think about other things that you would take into account when you make a large move. But I think in my youth, it was really, what am I trying to do? Does this get me closer to that goal? If the answer is yes, do it. If the answer is no, don't do it.
No. So you have this like incredible career at Stanford, but your last meet didn't turn out how you expected. And I think a lot of the themes of this podcast, we do talk about how failure can shape you, and obviously how we bounce back. You know, that was obviously a pivotal moment because can you talk a little bit about that moment, because you reference it early on when you begin to work back into track when you go to Houston, because that made you feel home.
So I would rephrase my time at Stanford as not as successful. It was okay.
Okay.
So yes, I was 2-time Olympian. So for people who never played a D1 sport or a D1 sport at Stanford, right? That's quite a big deal. But when I look at all my competitors and everyone, the totality of the track and field body, so to speak, or D1 atmosphere, it was just okay.
Okay.
So at least to where I wanted it to be. And my last meet of my senior year was like the meet I was expecting to have the breakthrough. Everything was starting to come together for the 400 hurdles, which is where I essentially really, really honed in. Things were just working right. And I have that tragic fall on hurdle number 8 in that race, and I come crashing down. I'm like bleeding. My bone is exposed. It was just tragic because this was the meet that I would have qualified for nationals, and it would have been that like great end or great cap to track and field, because I knew that I had a job waiting for me on Wall Street when I graduated. I knew that a professional track career wasn't really in the cards for me. So this was the end of the career of my running track competitively. And for it to stop short 3 or 4 weeks before I expected it to, that was just like terrible and devastating. So being carried off the track is not the way that I wanted to leave the track. Like I wanted to leave the track in triumph and leaving it all on the track, the last race, leaving it and like with the memories, right? But the last memory being so tragic, it was more traumatic in hindsight than I thought. It was terrible that day, right? But then I just essentially put it out of my mind, moved back home to New York, started working. And for anyone who's been an analyst on Wall Street at a top tier investment bank, you know that you're working a lot, right? So for the most part, I just buried it deep, right? Like, yeah, I was an athlete. Okay, that's something I did. And then went to work. And it was like moving on to the next thing, next rep, next idea. And I wanted to be the best in that arena. And so I never checked track results after that. I didn't go to any track meets as a spectator. I still had some of my friends, some of my teammates that were still competing at Stanford. Like one of my training partners actually became national champion a year or two later. So like a lot of my friends were competing really well, but it was still a wound for me that track as a whole. So I really stayed away from it. But the funny thing is when I made that logical leap to go and move to Houston to have this job, I realized that I didn't have any friends, right? I didn't know anyone in this new city. And you start to think, again, very logical, what's the best way to make friends in the way that I want to make them? And thinking through all of my really close friends that were, top 5 on my just called list or top 5 in my text history, these were all my teammates, right? And I realized that a lot of my friends came from my athletic teams.
Yeah.
So one of my training partners from college was from Houston, training in Houston, and I was like, let me just go and make some friends. I need to stay in shape. For 3 years, I haven't really been working out. Let me figure out something. So when I started training again, the Olympics were the farthest thing on my mind. It was just, let me stay in shape. Let's make new friends and find my new community.
Yeah. You talked about how like you jumped into finance right after graduation, and I believe you were at Goldman Sachs first, and you went to JP Morgan, and then when the trading floor opened up in Houston, you took that opportunity. One powerful thing that you say in the book, when reflecting on the financial world, it was, I realize now that as women, we are often tacitly informed by society that our own voice, particularly when it's used to question or compete with a man, should be silenced or subjugated, often to our detriment. And I think that's a super powerful statement. And because, it is a male dominant field, and you are, obviously you're a Black woman, and you were very conscious of that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, this wouldn't only provide value for women, but anybody who feels that they're not in a place they should be.
Yeah. It's such a heavy topic because, and like I said earlier, part of what drove me or helped me early in my career is I didn't care or didn't notice some of these, like some of the microaggressions. Some things like are very, very clear. Like when you talk to people and they figure out, oh, you went to college, and then it's like, oh, you played a sport, and then it's like, oh, a sigh of relief, like that's why.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's not really why. But it's one thing, and I think, and my favorite passage of the book comes from when I first landed in Nigeria. And for the first time, and just having the experience of, or seeing that everyone looked like me. And what I think often maybe the disconnect is that if you haven't had that experience, you don't realize how mentally taxing it can be to be an other in any environment. And, moving to Houston was for a trading seat, but the trading seat, like there were women in the office, but very few women traders. And, there was one senior woman trader, period. Right. And if you think about the old boys network or who you want your mentor to be, you're always looking for someone who similar to you in any shape, form, or fashion. And because you speak the same language, right? We can talk about hair, we can talk about nails, we can talk about our neighborhood, we talk about how we grew up. And for someone like, let's say if I was a Celtics fan, we could talk about that, right? Because that's a shared interest. And it's something like tacitly reminder that people, like, you're different, right? Yeah. So one thing that I had to do or focus on is finding bridges in other ways, right? And then also going out of my way to put myself in positions. I have an older mentor of mine who says you have to play in traffic, right? So you can get hit by a car in a good way, right? And the thing is that if you're not outside and you're not playing in traffic, no one's ever going to see you. And it's great advice, but the sad piece of it is that you have to play in traffic, right? Which means that you have to put yourself out in dangerous positions where it might be easier for someone else to be sought out, but you always have to do the seeking. And that can be exhausting if that's not what you want to do, or just exhausting to think about how much more difficult it is for you to get to the same place because you always have to be on the hunt. And it's something that I was acutely aware of wherever I was on the trading floor and who I was interacting with. And I don't say it as the environment in Houston wasn't toxic per se. I don't want it to be cast as this was just like super male chauvinistic. Yeah. Or I had really great mentors. I had some really great teammates that mentored me, trained me, that I worked with, but it was just very, very interesting where the reference point for most men in the workforce is that they have stay-at-home wives that don't work, right? So there isn't my sister is like a high-profile attorney. It's like, oh, my wife is baking cookies, or my wife is like nagging me about something with the kids. Like, these are the things that I was hearing every day, not another high-power woman doing something of stature that you're looking up to this person, right? And the last thing I'll say about this, the one good thing though is that the leader of commodities at the time when I was there was Blythe Masters, who was a very, very strong, powerful woman on Wall Street at the time. So she definitely was a mentor to me and someone who I and many people looked up to. But I do think that it is tough. It is tough to be the other, and having to always fight your way to be seen, to be heard, and just to be valued in the same way. That just comes natural for the majority of everyone else there.
Yeah. I can relate to just like playing in traffic. Mm-hmm. And I like that metaphor a lot because, I grew up Persian Jewish, went to a Jewish day school, and, I didn't play in traffic. I actually just sat there and felt different, for a while. I didn't start playing in traffic until, I grew up and understood that, I'm going to crush this, and then started to set the bars in the way that, I should have been doing. Mm-hmm. I want to kind of talk about like Houston because I think, hey, I've never been to Houston. I really need to visit Houston. I've been to Dallas. I've been to Austin.
Okay.
I have a friend who lives up in Lubbock. Okay. And well, they all went to Texas Tech.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. A little country, but yes.
It's super country.
Yeah.
But they love the Red Raiders. Mm-hmm. And, you take on this like awesome regimen, and it's funny because I just shared in the intro how I had this 4 weeks of talking to gentlemen who were consistency was their thing, right? Like that, that's really what they leaned into when we were having the conversations. But you're really the epitome of consistency when it, and I think it really shines when you're in Houston and when you're splitting your days And, then you agree to finally incorporate the 5:30 a.m. workouts. So you're working out at 5:30, then you're going to the training floor, and then you're training on the track in the evening. Talk to me about the value of discipline, how that was so important. And, Eric obviously played a tremendous role in that development because, I loved how you had these benchmarks and you went out there and you're like, all right, I'm going to get in shape and make friends. And then you work your ass off, and then, all right, like now I'm like actually, not competing with the high school girls, and now I'm competing with the elites in this group. And, also just how you made that quick transition from Victor to Eric, and the just awareness of the relationship, but also understanding, but this is my mission. Like that's like not only just like discipline with time, but just mental discipline that I think is like, I'm in awe of the way that you really outlined your progressions in Houston.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I'm a person who thrives with structure. And I credit that to my mother, where she would always say as a child that an idle mind is a devil's workshop, right? So it's like I always had to be doing something. And maybe, this is not a nod to burnout culture, but I tend to perform slightly overwhelmed. I perform well, slightly overwhelmed, like when I'm doing a little too much. And because it gave me less time to have that idle mind or just to think and not have anything else to do. So when I first started training, the problem was that I identified, besides not having friends, but really it was I had too much idle time. And what was available to me to fill up that idle time, I didn't like it, right? So my solution for that idle time problem was getting friends. And going back to the consistency in the timeline, for me, it was just I had to lock into what I was actually doing. And while initially I was there to make friends, the reasoning was I can't make friends if I'm a slacker, right? So I have to show up the way they show up. And once I moved training groups from Victor to Eric within, I think maybe it was a month's time or when it was, I had to lock into his system, right? And everyone else, all my friends or my friends to be, were waking up at 5:30 or going to lift at 5:30. So did I want to be where my friends were, or did I not want to be where my friends were? And so that was part of the calculus. And then Eric also having these grandiose goals for me and having this vision, there was a piece of me that didn't want to let him down because I wasn't there yet when I started training at 5:30. But I was just like, what the heck, right? This is what he needs me to do. He's a person of authority, though I place him in authority over in my life in this aspect. So I wanted to do what I was told and show up in the way I was supposed to show up, going back to that nod of working hard and then also just being disciplined as a person. And then once you lock into the schedule, and it just becomes natural. And then I think socially, it gives you're sharing in that struggle, right? So you're in the trenches with the troops, with the rest of the troops. And, when you're doing crazy lifts in the morning and now you have something it's the adrenaline rush you have throughout the rest of the day, the endorphin high of just thinking about, like, I really just, lifted 1,000 pounds on the leg press. I have something to talk about with my training partners throughout the rest of the day. And then I have something to brag about on the desk, right? Because these are, again, men that I'm working with who some work out, some don't work out, but I know 0 of them are leg pressing 1,000 pounds, right? So now that's a way that I can build a bridge where I know that I don't have easy connectivity, but if I can build a bridge with awe or surprise or shock or even a debate, like, I don't believe you, that's more engagement that I would get just being, the only girl, the only Black person on the team.
Yeah. It's funny because, you said this earlier and you were like, I was a rule follower, but you did ask a lot of questions and you did push back and you wanted reasons why. And, particularly dynamic with Eric when you did that. Sometimes it was just like, I have the way you describe Eric. I have someone like that in my life.
Okay.
So like I kept thinking about them when you were describing them. Talk to me about the importance of doing that, of getting the reasons why, not only when it comes to track, but just like as in life in general.
Mm-hmm. So, I like the way you put it, because I am a rule follower, but not blindly, right?
Yes.
So I'm not a sheep, but I think that I know for me that it's really important for me to understand why I'm doing something. Your pod is called Finding Purpose, right? So I think purpose is the why for a lot of the things that we do in our lives, whether it's why we get married, why we have children, why we start a podcast, why we start a business. All those different things are important, and especially because I initially had the purpose of finding friends and filling up this idle time. When he started to ask me to do things beyond that goal, it had to make sense for me to then lock in. Because what it was doing for me is understanding why I was doing something that was unpleasant, number one. And then two, it was subtly reshaping what my goal was. Because if I locked in to say, do these extra lifts or lift this amount twice as much as I lifted last week, beyond what I felt was my max, right? Because I'm going to get stronger is going to help increase my speed on the track and therefore run faster. Now I have to think about, is getting faster a goal? And should I make that more of a priority now that, these budding friendships can be cultivated and last? And I think it was the process for me subtly of reshaping what that goal was. And then also I think it was a way for him and I just to build trust. Because one thing I can say for sure with my college coach, didn't really have much trust in him. He's a great coach, but there wasn't really trust in that he knew how to work with me and my skill set.
Yeah.
And part of that was he did not like athletes questioning him.
I've had coaches like that.
Many times when we would have team meetings, he would say things like, sometimes you guys are too smart to run well. And it's just like, you can tell this is someone who just wants the quintessential trope of a jock, right? Come in, do what I say, and then leave, right? And the fact that I'm very cerebral, and once I understand, I feel that I can almost help you get more out of me, right? Because if I know that you want me to lift my leg in a certain way because it's going to extend my leg, and then I'm like, oh, I get the mechanics. They may not happen overnight because, body mechanics are body mechanics and it takes time. But what can happen is if I can visualize what it's supposed to look like, I can actually self-correct to the point where I don't need you to tell me when something is wrong. I can feel it or I can see it. And in that symbiotic relationship, you get much further more quickly because now when you check out, I'm checked in, right?
Yeah.
And or when you get tired of saying the same thing over and over again, I'm not tired because I know where it's supposed to be. So I think that was a big part of the relationship building. It was a big part of me just locking into new and bigger goals and just getting to the point where just trust. A lot of people say trust the process. But if you don't have any idea of why the process works, it becomes hard to trust it. And then at the end of the day, I'm a person who enjoys learning. And I think one thing that Coach Eric did really well is that he was a good teacher. He taught me something that I didn't know. And I wouldn't say that I thought I was smarter than any of my coaches. Like that's their calling, not mine. But I also knew my body a lot better than them until, they proved to me otherwise. So being able to learn something new about me, you got a whole lot more respect for me because I'm just like, okay, I can actually learn from you. And I think because education is so important to me, being able to learn from someone is just a high personal goal or sticking point.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Quick break to shout out our sponsor, Relive the Moments. Founded by John Lim, they're redefining how we share memories. From tap-to-play photo frames to interactive coasters, they turn ordinary objects into powerful, shareable experiences. Perfect for weddings, events, or milestone moments. Relive, reconnect, reimagine. Check them out at www.relivethemoments.com. Now back to the show. You know, you set the goal to run internationally, and you end up running in Trinidad. I believe
Right.
as your first international race, and now the dream gets bigger, and you want to be an Olympian. Talk to me about that journey, and I do kind of want to move a little forward about to the part where you come home.
Yeah. So going to Trinidad, that was great, and the whole experience started off with, you know, coach telling me that you've been invited. Like, first of all, who knows me? How did I get invited? Right? Obviously, he had a part to play in that, but being invited to run in this carnival-like meet in Trinidad,
Grassfield, right?
yeah, which was fun, right? Because it's one like someone, and then on top of that, I had appearance money, which I'd never, like, what?
Yeah.
Appearance fee? Like, that was crazy. So the fact that I was able to go train, someone was actually paying for me to appear in Trinidad to run, it just blew my mind. Like, how? You know, that's not what I ever thought was possible when I started off in the journey. So then going there, having the time of my life in that experience, and it was very low pressure, right? Because it was on a grass track, the times really wouldn't count for anything. And then for me to have run the fastest time in my life on a surface that really, on a very slow surface because it's grass, of course, that was just an eye opener for me to say, like, okay, Coach Eric really knows what he's doing, because that's insane. For me to have been able to do that then so quickly. So going back to trust.
You crushed that one too. Wasn't
Exactly.
It like 40,
and
52
I
or
and I
54
won.
or something like that?
And then I won,
Yeah.
right? So I won the race. So that was, you know, adrenaline high with other people who've been training with me. Someone I knew from college wasn't training in Houston, but was also training on her own and different things. So it was just like, there was adrenaline of running. There was adrenaline or the beauty of someone paying you to come and appear, getting prize money, and then just understanding that Coach Eric knew what he was talking about, right? So I was trusting him because I was seeing progress, but there was nothing that really told me that I was on track. And then I think the final thing about Trinidad too is why that was special. Around Christmas, a few months prior to that, I had pulled my hamstring, right?
Yeah.
So that was a devastating blow that I felt would have taken me back months, weeks of training. So for me to run so fast, so quickly after having that level of a setback, I was just like, okay, sky's the limit. I really need to lock in, because if he could do that in this time under those circumstances, while I'm still working a very stressful job, we can do something really special.
Yeah. And I think it's crazy because it's just a testament to how hard you were working, because it really was like 6 to 8 months, I think, when you were able to see like this is working. And that's awesome. Now the Olympics are on the horizon. Talk to me about being invited onto the team. Talk to me about that process and, you know, what it meant to you to finally step foot into your homeland.
Yeah. So being able to run for Nigeria, or just to even have the chance to compete, was a beautiful home journey and awakening, which is why I titled my memoir Running Home, because running, of course, meant so many different things to me, but home is so many places for me. And when I first got invited to compete for Nigeria at Penn Relays. So Penn Relays, there's USA's versus the world. So I had a chance to at least run on the quartet. But to make the team, I would still have to compete at Nigerian Olympic trials in Nigeria on Nigerian soil to make the team. This isn't, it's not a popularity contest. You don't get chosen. You have to compete.
Yeah.
You have to compete, and you have to earn that spot. So in the process of going to Nigeria for trials, I was invited to do a few meets, or tune-up meets, so to speak, in Nigeria before going to trials. And this was my first time going to Nigeria, period. We couldn't go as children, even though I begged to go, but we just couldn't afford it. 3 kids, quite expensive, and international travel wasn't as robust as it is today. So going to Nigeria for the first time, stepping off the plane, and like I was saying earlier, seeing that everyone looks like you. And I just never in my life at the time ever was in that sort of environment. In any school setting I was, like outside of my home, right? I was always othered. I was always the odd person out. I was always a minority. So, and for the most part, if that's life, you just go through it, right?
Yeah.
You understand what racism is. You understand what microaggressions are. You understand that in practice because you live it. But it hit me differently stepping off the plane and being in the majority. And I think it hit me because I didn't realize the weight of that, of what being a minority felt like until I was in the majority. Yeah, it's almost like, what is light without darkness? What is love without hate, right? And I think part of it is a relative value. And it was at that moment, like coming off the plane and all that you start to think about, how many times when you go into a room, you subconsciously count or know how many women are there, how many Black people are there, how many Black women. And no, not that anybody asked you or there's a test after a panel, you just know. You can always remember, like any panel that you've gone to, at least for me, I always knew how many. Not to report, just subconsciously, like, okay, you know. And then being in this environment where everyone is just like, nobody cares. Nobody cares like that you're darker than them, you're lighter than them. It's just, you're just people, right? So there's no labels there. And then, so that was like a reflective moment that was taking a little bit of weight, at least psychological weight off my shoulders. And then, it's time to compete. So being there, right, your size, like once you start to see who's there, you start sizing up the competition. And at this point, my goal was to make the team. And I'd run fast early, and I was starting to plateau a little bit in my season. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking and frustrating. And then there are a lot of women who were collegiate athletes that were running really fast times and into trials. So they were peaking at the right time. And, I was a little nervous. So I ran a couple meets, felt good, shook off the cobwebs. So it was time to really lock in for trials. Again, Coach Eric was not there. So I was also by myself without my coach, essentially on my own time. So everything in terms of training, just having to do things on your own time. And it gives a nod back to the discipline, right? It's because the discipline that I instilled early on in training and waking up, going to training, instituting my workouts, carried over when I was in Nigeria because I had to institute my workouts by myself and at the capacity that, that I was doing in Houston when I had my coach there. So that was a big deal. And then unfortunate, and like with any story, right, there's some tragedy, and that was me getting sick. And in the days leading up to the trials, like I get this crazy stomach bug out of nowhere. And it plagued me throughout trials to the point where, and that's why the subtitle of the book is A Journey of an Accidental Olympian, because this Olympic team was like, I made it through the skin of my teeth, right? There was no guarantees. And the fact that, the day before finals, like I'm literally like not eating because I'm just afraid of what's going to come out of me and trying to keep things down. And it's like between Imodium or Pepto, like it was just crazy in terms of, and I was just like weak and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to make this team. And the crazy thing, of course, that you'll read in the book is that because everyone in my office back in Houston didn't really understand how to make a team, everyone assumed that I was going to the Olympics. And I wasn't at that point until I made the team. So everyone is just expecting, Idara's going to be at the Olympics. And so I had that to contend with, because how can I go, take time off, go to Nigeria for trials and come up short. So I was really afraid of that, even though they were never my focus to begin with. That was a fear that I would come back and just let them down in a way, even though it had nothing to do with that. So, crossing the finish line and the results don't come out as quickly. So, And there's a couple of us who like cross around the same time. So I'm like, did I dip fast enough? Or like, did I, there's all the things that go in. And like at the end of my race, I basically dropped to the floor and I'm just like, I gave it all, right? Like this could be the end.
Left it all on the field, yeah.
Yeah, this could be the end. And then when my roommate at the time, she comes over to me and she's like, you did it. And we were both 400 runners. So she was one of the runners. I was checking her times and stuff. So we were both vying to make the team and she hadn't made it to the finals. So, not that, like, we're still friends, but it was just, I love the camaraderie that she showed me there and just being happy for me to have made the team, even though she didn't, and especially under the circumstances, because like we prayed together before the race, right? And through each round, right? We were very supportive of each other. And, finally like clinching and calling coach and calling my mentors back at home, calling my parents and my siblings. That was just a really, really big deal. And even more importantly, I missed my older brother's wedding for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And being able to, because at that point, when we were planning for
couldn't get married in London.
Right. Like at that point,
dude.
I mean, you plan 6 months to a year in advance. So when they started planning, they didn't know that I was going to be an Olympian. Right. So all of it came together at the right time. And, I'm forever grateful. Right. Because it was because of that moment that, I would eventually clinch my status as an Olympian.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like amazing. And how you say accidental, so it's just like your flu tryouts,
right?
You know what I mean? And obviously, like the habits and the discipline that you incorporated throughout your track career translates well into what you do now. And I think the work that you do is like really honorable, and is because I think there's a lot of people who are not as connected with the homelands that they are from, and I'm one of them. I mean, I'm Indian, and then my mom's Persian, and I visited home several times, but the connection I have with it is really more with the people there than it is with the land. And talk to me about the foundation and how that was born. And then, I kind of want to just like build off that because NŌK CHOC is awesome. We were talking about it earlier. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
I would attribute my passion to the homeland or Nigeria as a whole, really to my mother. Growing up, she made Nigeria sound like this magical place where being an immigrant was cool, right? Where the way she grew up, being able to speak multiple languages and then going to boarding school, or raising chickens. And my mom was the first entrepreneur. She said she used to sell eggs, right, in the market. And she and her brother, they raised chickens. And it wasn't like something that they did out of necessity. It was just, these are kids. Just like we go outside and play basketball or soccer or jump rope, they were raising chickens and selling them in the market. And that was just fun and mischievous, fun for them. And it just seemed like this place that was just full of culture. And culture was always positioned in our house as something to obtain and something of having some level of rich, something deeper than just your education or your title or your money, but just it was just that je ne sais quoi, right? That you just have to have, or the kids say aura now, right? And culture was that aura, and I wanted some of that. And I wanted to be known or just have a place away from, I didn't want to be different to be different, but there was a level of difference that felt like it was prioritized, in the sense that there was going back to learning, there's something that you could teach someone, right? That there was something interesting about you that made you unique, made you special, and being from somewhere else was that. And then the fact that she spoke so fondly of Nigeria and one day going back and what she gained from there, it would just felt like I needed some of that. And so even more than my brothers, right? So I would say out of my siblings, I have the greatest love affair with Nigeria. And I'm sure both my parents are just like, why you, what is this thing with you? And for me, I just always resonated with the culture. And I think, you know, I give them credit for naming me Idara and keeping it, like, it's funny because my mother has an English name, right?
What's her name?
Victoria.
Oh.
And so she has an English name. And, like, of course, there's a native local name, like family name.
Your name means joyful.
Yeah,
king.
it means joy. Like, my first name is Joy.
Yeah.
So it's just like...
Have you ever asked someone to be like, my name is Idara, but my friends call me Joy?
Yes, yeah. So I never did that, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh, my God.
so, and the funny thing, and I think part of the reinforcement was, as a child, everyone would mispronounce my name, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and as a kid, you're just like, whatever, call me whatever,
Yeah.
right? And then you remember the parent-teacher Idara conferences, right? My mother would make sure to correct the teachers, and like, you must correct your name because names mean so much, right? Like, if they call you Idara, that's not your name. It loses its meaning. So there was little reinforcements to say, these things matter. These things are so important, and your name has heritage. Your name means something to aspire to ascribe to. And it was just, there felt like everything you had just had meaning, and I wanted that, and I was chasing that, right? Like, there's just some level of deeper meaning of always wanting it. So then, you know, after my running days were over, and thinking back to my experience being an Olympian, one thing I noticed, unfortunately, for a lot of my training partners, is that, especially if they were homegrown or home-based athletes, so Nigerian athletes training and living in Nigeria, a lot of them did not have access to the economic possibilities or opportunities that I had, right? I was in a unique position. Like, there's no one else on the team who's working on Wall Street, right? So that is very, very unique in any context, in any, like, anywhere in the world. But, you know, so when I was training, I wasn't training as my livelihood. I wouldn't even call it a side hustle. It was just a hobby, right? That I took very seriously, but it was a hobby. But for them, it was their livelihood. So if they didn't earn, if they weren't paid training grants and things like that, that it was detrimental to them, because a lot of their family members in turn depended on them. And just listening to the stories from some of my teammates, I also learned that several of them, once their families found out that there was some athletic talent, and that just doesn't go for this track and field. This goes for basketball and weightlifting and football and all the different other sports. A lot of times the parents would really focus on and just change to invest in the sport, because that was the moneymaker at the time, right? So just like my experience in Trinidad, if I won that meet, I made money, I bring that money home, and it's like, oh wow, you can make money running. Why go to school? School doesn't pay you. Track does, so let's focus on track. And so I saw that as a problem that I felt that I wanted, or I could at least have a hand in fixing. So when I launched Let Girls Read, Run, Grow, I started thinking about, how do I take my level of success, or what people have ascribed success to me, how do I take that and bottle it up in the most efficient way? And thinking about the things that made me successful, I kept coming back to the same thing. So education, athletics, and entrepreneurship. And how do I put this into an organization or create programming around it to give back to them in this way? And that's really where Let Girls Read, Run, Grow really came from, right? And the name really kind of spells out all those different things. So Let Girls, we're focused on girls, read, education, run, athletics, and then grow. And the funny thing about grow, we're focusing on entrepreneurship, but as we'll get to, and thinking about NŌK CHOC, I was really focused on the agricultural pipeline, because especially as a commodities trader and just being in the commodities world, I also noticed that a continent with so much arable land, we Nigerians, Africans in general, were also similar to America, right? Because at one point this was a very agrarian society. We're chasing like desk jobs, right? Where I kept on, you'd see so many hungry people, and it's like, but you have land. You can still feed yourself, right? There's no reason. I mean, you can be living in poverty, but you shouldn't be hungry. And I think that piece of it really bothered me because there was just like, it was a light bulb moment to say, but you can plant something, right? You don't have to buy it with dollars or naira or money.
Grow something.
You can grow something so you can feed yourself. So I'm very big on sustainability and being self-sustaining, self-sufficient. And so the creation or the build out of Let Girls Rerun Grow has really been almost like my love letter to Nigeria and to Nigerian girls, or not really Nigeria, but Africa as a whole, just to say you have everything you need to be successful. And then I think the other piece that I talk about less, I think it's also partially my duty too, to like give Nigeria a return on its investment for letting my parents leave. So like, because they didn't come back, right? So they came to America and they essentially got what they came for, but their investments are all here in America, right? They didn't take their talents to go back to Nigeria to develop that place, right? So the brain drain has been detrimental to, the African continent as a whole, because a lot of your best and brightest went to build up other nations and not their own. So it's part of not that Nigeria asked me to do this or Africa asked me, but I do think there is a level of duty and reciprocity needed for people like me who have benefited from our parents' sacrifice, and then also, because many of our parents were actually sponsored by Nigeria to leave, gather skills, come back to use it at home, and many of them just never came back.
Never thought about it like that. And plus, the investment is not only the ones that your parents made, but it's also the 3 children who are, contributing here in the United States. So I love the mission behind it and the double meaning behind the word grow, because, that's beautiful in itself. Is NŌK CHOC another project, or they go hand in hand?
So they go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do, right?
And going back to being very logical, one of our
you are very logical.
Everything about the charity or the nonprofit is purposeful through programming. And the way we wanted to do it or set it up, our structure, was to create programs that spoke to each of the 3 pillars. And so one of our programs is we have Camp Next Gen, which is a sport and STEAM camp that we have each and every year, and it travels around the continent. This was our first year that we went back to Nigeria, because we started off in 2019 in Nigeria, and this year we went to Nigeria, but actually in my home state of Akwa Ibom. And what it is we take 150 kids, often underserved, and over 3 days we take them through athletic training and then also a STEAM workshop. So for the first 3 years, we focus on just drones. So they build drones, fly drones, and then they pitch drone businesses back to the group based on everything they learned. And the last 2 years, we still do the drones, but we've added in coding in Scratch. We've done some robotics, some electricity workshops, etc. So what we've been able to do is really bring that student-athlete experience to life. And what I was talking about earlier, where I saw that a lot of times students will abandon their studies to chase athletics because that's where the money is. The purpose of that program is twofold. One, to say that you can do both and you should do both. And my story is, I did both and made an Olympic team. Not saying you should do both in that way, but you should definitely still pursue both sides until exhaustion, until one thing takes you out of the other. And then the other thing is, if we can introduce STEAM subjects in a fun way and bring you to the finish line and say that, wow, I can fly a drone, this is really cool. When it comes back to learning physics, learning the math, learning the aerodynamics, that is everything behind the scenes that allows drones to fly. We want your mindset to be stuck on the thrill of flying and racing a drone rather than the equations in physics. So if you know that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, it'll give you something to hold on to when the going gets tough. That's one piece of it. And then we have other programming, but the big legacy project for us is building out this all-girls primary school in Nigeria. What I've learned is that in Akwa Ibom State, where I'm from in Nigeria, it has one of the highest concentrations of primary age school girls out of school. So, I mean, I live in New York now, and there's like universal 3K, 4K, pre-K, and, public schools available for all. To hear that kids between ages 5 and 11 are out of school, it's unheard of. And in the past, when we've done some work with orphans, I remember going to an orphanage and meeting an 18-year-old who was in the equivalent of 6th grade, because they didn't start school until age 10. And you think about how far behind that individual is and how frustrating it would be to look like an adult and function like a child. That just breaks your heart, right? And I wanted to do my part to fix it, right? And I think there are many, we have maybe not, a lot of people can tell you stories of their grandparent who became very successful in XYZ arena, but only had an 8th grade education, right? And I think if you get the foundation right, the sky is the limit, especially with the tools. So if we can focus on primary education, get that right, give a hunger for learning to these children, similar to the hunger I had for learning growing up, by the time they're in like junior high level or high school level, even if they're not in the greatest conditions, if they have enough access, they can manage and figure it out, right? If they don't have the resources. So that has been, a really big goal, and I see it as my legacy project to create a world-class education at a primary age level, and then level it up by scaling it with teacher training and curriculum. So the question is, okay, a lot of people create schools and build schools in Nigeria, in Africa as a whole, third world nations, and sadly it's become a business, right? How do you sustainably fund it? And that's where NŌK CHOC comes in. And not giving a nod back to my time as a commodities trader, I wanted to sell a commodity product that we can use to sustain this venture for the long haul. Because Nigeria is a place where oftentimes the government will not pay teachers on time for months on end. So you'll have teachers that will go on strike, or, of course, that will breed behavior where you pay for grades. Right, and we didn't want that, especially not at the primary age level. So we wanted something that, if you take business, and I think social enterprises always the best way to go, because if you have a business that's incentivized by capitalism or normal business, and then you use those proceeds for good, everyone is incentivized to do good on their side of the aisle. And why a commodity business? A commodity business, or a commodity product is something that you buy because you need it. Like, it's a baseline product. When I was a commodities trader, I sold power, which is electricity, and nat gas, And whether it's cooling season, whether it's heating season, you need energy, right? You need electricity.
Yeah.
So I wanted a product, not energy, but a product that people would use often, not because of the good that we're doing, not because we're funding girls' education in Africa, but just because this is a product they want to buy. And then I wanted a product that was indigenous to Nigeria, so we can tie it back to our mission, and then also something that we can use to teach entrepreneurship with. And we landed on cocoa as the commodity, and then the product is a vegan hot cocoa. And, the way that we got there is initially I wanted to create a chocolate bar. It was around the time. This is pandemic now.
Yeah.
And artisan chocolate companies, bean to bar chocolate companies were heating up. And I was seeing, everyone's quarantining at home. But you're seeing all these videos of like, make chocolate in your home and like business blows up or whatever. I'm like, oh, let's do that. And So at the time I had a friend who was financing cocoa farmers and cocoa producers. And it just worked out that we were both talking about like creating a chocolate bar and just being in that space. And then we thought, if we can create a chocolate bar, it's a cool project in class. It's something that maybe we create an indigenous brand and have the girls sell it, do all the pieces of creating a business. And then it'd be a really great case study for the girls at our school. And after some research, figured, you want a shelf-stable product, which hot cocoa fit the bill. Hot cocoa as a category hasn't been innovated in the last 60 years. If you think hot cocoa and you're an American, there's one brand that you think of. And so we thought, this is a place ripe for disruption. So why not be the disruptors? And really that was the crux of it. Like, let's create this hot cocoa. It's a cool brand or a cool product. We all drink it in the holidays. So anytime it gets cold, if you're not drinking tea, which, I drink tea every day, but hot cocoa is also a hot product.
Yeah.
And children love it. We're focused on a primary school for girls. So everything just lined up in terms of the value, in terms of the product aligning with our age group of girls. So it was just something to just tinker with and see how far we could get. And it's really been a great journey from start to finish.
I love that. And I would love to try it.
Yeah.
So I should, we should get one for the office, Claudia. I'm really grateful for you coming down here. And I'm just enamored by your story and excited to see what you have coming up and watch you grow, let girls read, run, grow. Mm-hmm. And, it's beautiful work that you're doing. I do ask, a couple questions to every guest, obviously aligning with the theme. And one of the questions is, what does purpose mean to you?
Mm-hmm. For me, purpose is what drives you and what wakes you up every morning. So it's a combination of what are you trying to achieve, but what are you trying to put back into the world? And an exercise that I've done and I do periodically is, if I were to write my obituary today, what would I want it to say? And then the question from that is, am I living a life that would get to that obituary? And if the answer is yes, then I'm aligned on my purpose. If the answer is no, then that's where I start to make some changes. So I think it's just the underlying reasons as to why you do what you do every day or work towards the things you're working towards each day.
I love that. It's a very different perspective, but when I think of that, I always think about who's going to be at my funeral. I think that's kind of the standard, not standard. I mean, but like when people think about, when they reflect in that manner. But I love that perspective. And another question I want to ask you is, what advice would you give to somebody on that journey of finding purpose?
Well, the biggest thing is to find it, right? It's really about self-reflection. And I think the best way to find your purpose is to understand you. And the way you get to understanding you is to constantly ask yourself why until you get to there's no more whys. Like, why do I wake up? And why do I do a job? It's like to get money. Okay, why is money important? Because I need to buy stuff. Like, what are you buying? And it's like, why do you buy those things? Why do you care about the types of things that you buy? And then you ask that question deep enough, and then you start to realize what actually matters to you. And then once you realize what matters to you, you ask yourself, why does that matter? And then you also take an audit if this is what you want to matter to you. Because I think sometimes we can fall into the trap, and I fall into the trap, whether it's professionally or personally, where other people will ascribe your why. Right? You start working in a firm that's quite hierarchical, and it's like, oh, you do 2 years as an analyst, and then you do another 2 years or 3 years as associate, and it's like, okay, your goal should be being an MD or partner or whatever it is at your firm. And then, you think that's what you're supposed to do because that's how it goes for the most successful there. But then the question is that what success means to you, right? And there's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong answer holistically, but there is a right answer for you. And I think finding that out in every area of your life, whether it's wellness, fitness, whether it's relationship, whether it's in your business or your workplace, those are the questions that I continually ask myself and refine, because it changes, of course. Just like my goal went from making friends and running an international meet to running the Olympics, right? That changed. And so these things are not static. They're definitely dynamic questions to continually ask yourself. And that is how you are able to get clarity on what your purpose is and really be able to shape a reality that aligns with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I love this conversation. And if you can you share with my audience how they could reach you on what you are currently working on and whatever you'd like to share, frankly.
Awesome. So the best way to reach me is on my website, which is just my full name, idaraotu.com. All my contact information is there. And then I also encourage you to check out NŌK CHOC.com. So that's NOKCHOC.com. You'll find out everything that we're doing with our hot cocoa company. Definitely try some, stock up for this year. And then finally, on the NŌK CHOC side, we have a fundraising platform that allows schools, teams, and organizations to use our cocoa as a fundraising item to help you reach your goals. That is completely free and easy to use. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Idara. Claudio, thank you. He is my executive producer here at Kaya Visions. If anybody is looking for content, whether it's starting their podcast, whether it is creating marketing material for their respective business, feel free to reach out to me or connect directly with Claudio at Kaya Visions. I am so grateful for this conversation, so grateful for my audience who continues to support, to share, to engage with me, because the more that we do, the more we're able to build this community and hopefully impact other people positively. So until next time, thank you so much, everyone, and see you next time.